This is the last video in my mistake series, and I hope I'm also showing you some ways to improve your paintings. I think it's so important to plan your painting. Before I begin, I look at my drawing and visualize the order that I'll paint things. I try to come up with a logical sequence based on what's easiest. And with each object, I'm working in layers from light to dark, so those get their own game plans. I can see all of this in my mind, but it might be easier to make a list. I often paint the star of the painting first, but sometimes it makes more sense to begin with the background. It's hard to paint a light background around a dark figure, so I'll paint the figure last. Next up, try not to rely on local color. For example, I'm going to paint this tree with local color. That's the basic color of an object, unmodified by shading or light. So the local colors of an average tree are brown and green, so that's all I'm painting them with. The problem with local color is you're painting what you think you see and not what you actually see, and you need more than two colors to paint a realistic tree. This is a common student mistake, and when I was a teacher I wondered if the problem was laziness or the inability to see color variations, or maybe it was a little of both. You need to really look at the colors that you're trying to paint. Sure, the tree trunk is brown, but isn't it more of a purplish gray brown? Used on their own, some green watercolors look really fake. They're colors that don't appear in nature. Add yellow or brown, blue, or even purple, or basically any color, and greens look a lot more real. Next, you're painting too lightly. I'm going to paint these petunias as an example. Watercolors can look washed out and so lightweight that it seems like they're about to float away. And if that's what you're going for, fine, but if you want your colors to be richer, you'll need to spend some time layering on more colors, or be bold with them on the first pass. I also think of painting lightly as, can I be done now? That's another common student question that always made me wonder if students were lazy, or they lacked confidence, or they just didn't get it. Another problem beginners have kind of makes sense. If you want to make something darker, all you have to do is add black, right? Not necessarily. Black might work in certain dramatic lighting situations, but on a petunia in sunlight, not so much. I never use black. It has a tendency to overwhelm any color you mix with it, and you end up with dead, muddy colors. Used alone, it creates a black hole in your painting. Look around at some black object that's near you right now. Sure, it's black-ish, but is it really the darkest thing you've ever seen in your life? I create all the darks in my paintings by mixing a series of colors, such as purple, green, blue, and brown. So when I want to make my colors deeper, I reach for more colors, not black. The last problem, losing your white. I thought I'd illustrate this next one by painting gumballs. As you can see, they're not perfectly round, but they're shiny. So I'm painting the red one, but I've forgotten about the white shapes at the top. I can try to lift the paint off, but that glare will never be truly white again. The gumball ends up looking softly round but not glossy. So here's my solution. On the dark purple gumball, I'm going to use masking fluid. It's a rubbery liquid and you just paint or dab it on. It'll take a few minutes to dry and then you can paint right over it. The masking fluid will protect all the places where I don't want the purple to go. The thing that makes watercolor unique is how artists deal with white. Oil painters can save little highlights for last when they paint, but watercolor painters have to think about it as soon as they start working. I always like to have at least some pure white, which is just unpainted paper, in everything that I create. It seems to sparkle when it's surrounded by darker colors. Without it, a watercolor can look subdued or even suffocated. Again, maybe that's what you're going for, so feel free to disregard this advice, but yeah, I think you need white. I'm going over the purple a second time to create a richer color. It's hard to tell here, but I've added a bit of green to the purple for some variety. And there are a couple of dim orange and yellow highlights near the bottom. I've let this dry a bit and I've removed the masking fluid. I use a rubber cement pickup and sometimes even my fingernails. It's perfectly white underneath. Then I like to blur the edges with a small damp brush. And this gumball is reflecting the colors of all the other ones, so that's why I've masked off so many areas. I've painted marbles like this, and it's really fun to add these different, often very abstract shapes and colors, but I'm keeping some parts white, of course. See how the red gumball is reflected here? This left side is my favorite part. These little specks look too harsh as is, so I'm adding a bit of color and softening their edges. And in a second I'll use a damp brush to lift a few subtle highlights from the darkest shadows. The number of ways artists can screw up their paintings is infinite, but I've shown you 15 major ones. I hope you enjoyed this series and it's helped you learn more about watercolor. Thanks for watching!